Hope our video's on. This is the November 2nd, 2023 Bowling Green, Warren County Planning Commission. Angela, if you'd call the roll, please.
Yes, Chairman. Commissioner Commissioner Amy Drain.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner, I apologize, let me start back over. Commissioner Casada. Commissioner Cecil, sorry. Commissioner Ritchie. Commissioner Gay. Commissioner Vitale. Commissioner Shaw. Commissioner Starks.
Yes.
Commissioner Volkert.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Warren.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Angela. Commissioners, you have the minutes of our October 19th meeting in your packet. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we call for a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Volkert.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Drain.
Abstain.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes.
And Chair Warren.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Commissioners, we have we all have our subdivision and site development plans in your packets. Are there any questions? All right. Mr. Peterson, do we have any old business? We will begin our new business public hearing right now. Mr. Moore.
Mr. Warren, if you would please, I'd request that you order the record tonight to include all of the relevant and statutory and regulatory provisions, the Commission's entire file for each application on tonight's docket, and the qualifications for each staff witness who testify before you. Finally, I'd request that you administer the oath to those staff witnesses.
You all swear to tell the truth? Yes. Thank you very much. Our first item tonight is 2023-57Z County. The Edwards Family Trust, care of Travis Edwards, has filed an application to rezone 8 acres located on Glasgow Road and C.W. Moore Road, approximately 240 feet northwest of the intersection of Glasgow Road, C.W. Moore, and approximately 465 feet southwest of the intersection of the Glasgow Road, C.W. Moore Road, from Ag to RE residential with a general development plan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a pre-application meeting on June the 23rd for the property that you mentioned. The current zoning is agriculture. Current land use is agriculture, and the future land use is rural density residential. And go back to the site plan. As you mentioned, the applicants are proposing to rezone in order to subdivide the property into 7 building lots, and the site plan can be found on page 7 of your packets for reference. Looking down at the property history, the Planning Commission approved a flume amendment from agriculture to rural density residential in September of 2023, just as a reminder of that. And then looking at the bottom of the page, the proposal complies with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process and is generally compatible with the surrounding area. Therefore, the staff recommendation is approval, pending public hearing, testimony, and discussion here tonight. But that's all we have for a staff report. We can answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Amy?
I have one question.
Sure.
Has the applicant responded to the October 10th letter?
Yes, correct. So those have all been incorporated into the DPC's
Okay.
development.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Starks. All right, hearing none, is the applicant here or anything that they would like to, excuse me, is there any opposition to this request? Let's go back. Is the applicant here or anything that you would like to add to this? I'm sorry, sir. No, I have nothing else. Thank you very much. Is there anyone here tonight in the audience that has opposition to this request? All right, hearing none, commissioners will call for a motion, please.
I make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan, docket number 2023-57Z County. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Drain,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks,
Yes.
Commissioner Volker,
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Graham,
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Dean, Warren.
Yes, ma'am. The motion is approved and goes to the Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Our next item tonight is 2023-68ZBG, Glenda F. Rigsby Estate, care of Doris Akteyarlee, has filed an application for zone 9.77 acres located at 310 and 340 Bill Dedmon Road from Ag to RR Rural Residential with the General Development Plan. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a pre-application meeting on December 1st of 2022 for the property that you mentioned. The current zoning is agriculture. Current land use is single-family residential, and the future land use is low-density residential. We'll flip back over to the site plan. As you mentioned, the applicants are proposing to rezone from agriculture to RR in order to create a total of 4 lots, and the existing homes are proposed to remain. There are two homes on the property, and they're proposed to remain. And there is a site plan on page 6 for your reference. Looking down at the bottom of the page, staff recommendation is approval pending public hearing, testimony, and discussion. The proposal does comply with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process and is generally compatible with the surrounding area. Staff has noted a few considerations relating to the proposed front yard setback and the proposed minimum home size. And if you flip over to page 2, I can review those for you. Under the site characteristics review, the very first paragraph there, setbacks will adhere to the RR standards. The existing structures on the east side of Bill Dedmon Road are set back a greater distance than the minimum 25-foot yard setback required in the RR zone. The existing home at 3010 Bill Dedmon is roughly 40 feet from the front property line. Staff did suggest that the applicant consider requiring an increased front yard setback. However, this was left unaddressed. And then looking down under the site design and compatibility review category, the surrounding architectural features. The applicant agreed in DPC number 1 that any new primary residential structure shall contain a minimum of 1,200 square feet. That is nearly 500 square feet less than the median identified for the area, with the median home size being 1,671 square feet. But we have those there for your consideration, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Other than the square footage, how do so the way the DPC is currently written, it could be a completely vinyl home and CMU block foundations. And so how does that compare to what's in the surrounding area?
Sure. So if we go back over to the architectural features here, do we have under building materials review? So 50% of the homes in the area have an all vinyl exterior.
Okay.
There, and then they do have a mixture of aluminum siding, metal siding, brick or wood for the remaining.
And do you have any note of the foundations? So this one is written, it says either a block, brick, or stone foundation. That means block, really, at the end of the day. So how does that compare?
I think actually it's a mixed bag out in that area. They're under building foundations. There are poured concrete, brick, stone, plain face block, and split face block. So I think there's a variety of those out
Very
there.
good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Amy. Is the applicant here or anything that they would like to add to this recommendation?
Would you mind coming up so we could ask a couple questions?
Yes, ma'am. If you would state your name and address, please.
My name is Doris Akteyarlee, and I live at 2834 Bill Dedmon Road.
Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do,
Thank you.
yes.
Mr. Volker?
You heard what Amy had to say about the two considerations.
Yes.
Would you consider going to a 40-foot setback?
I'm not inheriting this property. It's going to my sisters, and the two lots that have nothing on it, that will be, there's probably not going to be anything put on them.
So would you be okay with a 40, if something was to be done, a 40-foot setback?
Yes, we.
So, wait a minute. So you're the applicant, but your sister is,
I have 5 sisters.
okay. So who will build the house?
No one's building a house. We're just splitting the land. My mother left that for 4 of my sisters.
Oh, this is an inheritance then?
Yes.
You guys are just, you're just distributing?
We're not building anything. It's just being split so we can get the deeds in their name.
Okay, got it, okay. Then that is.
But in the event.
Yeah, in the event, then if you're okay with the 40-foot setback, would you be okay with a minimum of 1,600 feet if you were to sell the lots and someone else build a house?
I don't know what you mean
So,
by
so
that.
the average size of a house out in the area is 1671, and you guys have proposed 1,200 square feet as a minimum square footage. Would you be okay going to a 1,600 to get it in the average of what is out there? And so perhaps, yeah,
Yeah,
like
if I
you.
sold it?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yeah,
That's
right.
right. Okay, so great, thank you. And then the last one would be, I don't know if Mr. Volker mentioned this or not. Clearly, you don't plan to build on these, so the only
No.
thing we need to do is address what would be there in case you were to sell the property. And since you live there, this would actually protect and help you as well. Would you be okay with a brick or stone veneer foundation as opposed to a CMU block foundation?
I'm sure it would be fine.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Okay, before you sit down just a minute, Mr. Moore, if you would move, Hamp, if you would move the microphone over to where we could hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, sorry. So the way I heard it, the applicant has agreed to increase the minimum square footage for any single-family residence which is constructed, any new single-family residence, from 1,200 square feet to 1,600 square feet. In addition, she also agreed that any new residence would have a minimum front setback of 40 feet. And finally, she agreed that all exposed foundations or skirting shall be either of brick or stone. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, sir.
And, ma'am, is that your agreement with regard to the development plan conditions?
Now, the 1,600 is if they sell the property, is that correct?
That's
correct.
It would be with the property, so if they decide to build a house, it'd still have to be 1,600 square feet.
Okay.
Or if you decide.
Yeah. Well, they're deeding it off to the sisters, so.
Gotcha.
I don't know if they could afford to do that. See, I'm not getting this property, it's my sister's, and I don't know if they would be able to afford a 1,600 square foot.
Did we misunderstand you when you, I thought I understood you to say that no one was planning to build?
They're not planning on building,
Okay,
that I know of, but if they do, later on.
okay. Well, then, should we maybe table this until they can be here?
They don't even, I've got a couple of them that don't even live in this state.
Okay.
So just do the 1,600, that'll be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So 1,600 square foot in DPC number 1, 40-foot setback in that same DPC, and foundations made of brick or stone in DPC number 2.
So let's add the word veneer, brick or stone veneer. They could still do a
vinyl.
CMU block, but they would need a veneer.
And is that your agreement? Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doris.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience tonight that has a question or opposition to this request? All right, hearing none, we call for a motion,
I
Commissioners.
make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with a condition upon the general development plan, docket number 2023-68Z, county, based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by the compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Starks?
Yes.
Commissioner Volker?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Warren, I'm sorry, Commissioner James?
Yes, ma'am.
And then Chairman Warren.
Yes, ma'am. The motion is approved. Thank you, Angela. And goes to Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Our next item tonight is 2023-69Z County. Brad Carr has filed an application to rezone 2+ acres located at 3415 Hammett Hill Road from Ag to RR Rural Residential with a general development plan. Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a pre-application meeting back in July for the property over on Hammett Hill Road. The current zoning of the property is ag, current land use is ag, and then the future land use designation is also ag. So looking back to their site plan, we will go over their request. They are proposing to rezone approximately 2 acres located at 3415 Hammett Hill Road from ag to RR in order to subdivide the existing residence on a smaller lot. The remaining acreage will be added to an adjacent agricultural tract. Looking down to the bottom of page 1, we have just a couple of points to consider. Staff has noted considerations related to the proposed front building setback, so we can look over on page 2 for that, to lay out lot sizes and setbacks. The setbacks will adhere to the RR standards set forth in the zoning ordinance. Existing structures on the south side of Hammett Hill Road are set back a greater distance than the minimum 25-foot front yard setback required in the RR zone. For reference, the existing building on the property nearest Hammett Hill Road is around 120 feet off the front property line. The nearest structure to the west is around 30 feet from the front property line, and the nearest structure to the east is around 65 feet from the front property line. Staff suggested that the applicant consider requiring an increased front building setback. However, this was left unaddressed. Next thing to look at will be the lack of a garage requirement, which is on page 3. And under the surrounding architectural features, the median home size, the current residence is 1,855 square feet with a 2-car attached garage. The applicant agreed, or about half of the homes have a garage, and the applicant agreed that any new home will have a minimum of 1,600 square feet of heated space in DPC number 2, but they did not impose a garage requirement. And then the final thing to look at will be the building orientation, which is also on page 3. And the existing residence is not oriented to face Hammett Hill Road. Building orientations for other homes in this section of Hammett Hill Road vary. However, a majority of the homes are oriented to face Hammett Hill Road. Staff suggested that the applicant omit DPC number 1 so that there would be flexibility for any new home constructed on the property to face Hammett Hill Road. However, this was left unaddressed. So with those points to consider, staff's recommendation is for approval pending any public hearing testimony and discussion of those points. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
All right. Thank you, Jenny.
Jenny, so let me ask you this. What would you guys suggest as a setback?
I think that would be best for you all to consider. I don't know that staffs necessarily have a specific
Okay.
suggestion for a setback.
Okay. And so one other question, if I may. Did I understand that the remaining portion of this lot was going to be added to an adjacent tract?
Yes, sir. It'll be added to an adjacent agricultural tract.
And would that be Lot 3-2?
Yes, that's the portion of the lot that will be added to the adjacent tract.
All right. So I may not be following here. Is Lot 3-2, until it's added to the adjacent agricultural tract, is that a buildable lot?
It doesn't currently exist.
Okay.
Right
And-
now, it's all one property. Yes.
Okay, and so, I see, it's all one property. And so, once it is combined with the adjacent property, will it still be this size and a standalone lot that's buildable by itself?
No, it will be added to the adjacent lot, but it has to be subdivided, so this portion of the lot will be added to the adjacent agricultural
Okay.
tract.
And so the reason for my question is I'm trying to understand the implication of the DPCs if Lot 3-2 is going to be added to the adjacent property. Where will the DPCs come from if it's joined with another tract?
The DPC is for the lot 3-1, which is, they would be in case the existing residence were to ever be demolished and
I
a new
see.
structure be
Okay.
constructed on the property.
Thank you for clarifying. I wasn't
Yeah.
tracking there. Okay, thank you.
So let me ask one other question
Yeah.
on the setback. The house that's right across the street, do we have an idea what that setback is?
We can look.
It doesn't look, is that the 30 foot?
That would be to the west, so I don't believe so.
Is that the 65? No, the east is 65, 30 feet.
It's to the west.
It's 30 feet. The one to the west is 30 feet.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the one right across the street. Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for Jenny? Thank you very much. Is the applicant here? Yes, sir. If you, anything you would like to add?
Would you mind coming up and letting us ask a couple questions?
Yes, sir. Your name and address, please.
Brad Carr, 3415 Hammett Hill Road.
Mr.
Owensboro, Kentucky.
Carr, you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Carr, you heard a couple of things that we talked about. Would you be okay increasing the setback some?
Yeah, the house now is set back off the road.
And that's what it looks
Yeah.
like. I mean, and
It's
it
kinda
looks like
down
you
on
have
a hill, and
It
it
looks like you have
looks-
a bunch of trees in
Yes,
front of it
yes.
also.
Yeah.
I mean, would you be okay with a 40-foot setback?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's great.
And am I correct that all we're talking about doing is, in the event the existing house is destroyed and rebuilt?
That
That's
is
the way I
correct.
understand it.
Yeah.
And then would you be okay with requiring a garage?
Yeah, that's fine. I had a
Okay.
big shop behind it, but yeah, that's, Yeah.
Okay, and then I guess the other thing that was questioned was the orientation. I think they suggested just eliminating number one in the DPCs. Would you be okay with that?
that's, I mean, yeah, right now the house turns the other way and looks over the hill. That's what it, like the back of the house faces the road.
Okay,
Because you got all the trees behind it.
so I think what they want, if it was to be knocked down, is the front of the house to face the road.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you?
That's fine with me, yeah.
And you have no plan currently to demolish the house?
No,
You're only
absolutely not.
separating it so you can sell some property here,
Yeah,
correct?
they sell it, yeah, the house,
Okay,
yeah.
very good. So this would be just in the event it's demolished for
Yep.
some reason, then
Yep.
whoever built back would have these?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
All right, Commissioners, any other questions? Mr. Carr, before you sit down, any other questions? Mr. Moore's going to read, if you pull the mic.
Sure. Mr. Carr, so the way I understand your agreement is that your development plan conditions will require that if the existing home is demolished and replaced, that it will have at least 1,600 square foot of living space, that it'll have at least a 40-foot setback, and that there will be constructed at least a two-car garage attached or detached.
Yes, sir.
And is that what you're agreeing to?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is there anyone in the audience tonight that has a question or an opposition to this request? All right. Hearing none, Commissioners, call for a motion, please.
I make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan, docket number 2023, 69Z County. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Drain,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks,
Yes.
Commissioner Volkert,
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Graham,
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Warren.
Yes, ma'am. The motion is approved and goes to Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Thank you, Mr. Carr. Our next item tonight is 2023-70Z County. Mark and Robin Douglas have filed an application to rezone 3.79 acres located on Plano Road, approximately 98 feet north of White's Chapel Road from Ag to RE Residential State with the General Development Plan. Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a pre-application meeting for the property over on Plano Road back in October. The current zoning of the property is ag, current land use is vacant, and then the future land use designation is also agriculture. So going back to the site plan, which you can find on page 7 of the staff report, looking down to our recommendation, the proposal complies with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process and is generally compatible with the surrounding area, and with that, staff recommend approval, pending public hearing testimony and discussion tonight. That's all that I have, but I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
So the DPCs do not seem to address the foundation. Am I overlooking that?
It just says on DPC number 2 that exposed plain face block is not permitted for building foundations.
Ah, got it. All right, very good. Thank you. And the 1,400 square foot with a minimum two-car garage, is that what we would see in that area?
So looking to page 3 under surrounding architectural features, there's a range of home sizes, but the proposed 1,400, the minimum home size is over 300 square feet less than the median. However, 3 of the adjacent homes are less than 1,300 square feet.
Very good.
So comparable.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Is the applicant here and anything else that they would like to add? If you come to the microphone just so we can hear you, sir. If you would state your name and address, please, sir.
Mark Douglas, 3703 H.E. Johnson Road, Alberton.
Mr. Douglas, swear to tell the truth.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Douglas?
I don't think so.
All right, thank you, Mr. Douglas. All right. Commissioners would call for a motion, please.
I make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan, docket number 2023-70Z County.
Wait,
Based-
hold on just a minute, Amy. I made a mistake. I forgot. Is there any opposition to this request tonight? Okay, I'm sorry, Amy.
Can I start at paragraph 2, or do I need to?
Start all over.
I make the motion to approve again the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan, docket number 2023-70Z County. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, The proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 Comprehensive Plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Drain?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks?
Yes.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Dean Warren? Or Chair Warren, sorry.
That's fine. Yes, the motion has been approved and goes to Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Our next item tonight is 2023-72ZBG. Goodwill Industries of Kentucky has filed an application to rezone 1.3 acres located at 1806 US 31W bypass from general business to highway business with a general development plan. Ms. Hurt?
Thank you, Chair Warren. We had a pre-application meeting back in July for the property you just referenced, located at 1806 US 31W bypass. And the applicants are proposing to rezone the property from general business to highway business in order to expand the current building that is located on the property. And I will just mention that the main reason for the request is the expansion. In general business, your building footprint is limited to 10,000 square feet. And so, and they're actually already larger than that as it currently stands. So this request to HB is for the sole purpose of extending the buildings and so that it can be larger than 10,000 square feet. This is the site plan that was submitted with the application for your reference. You can see the aerial view here. Zoning, again, is currently general business. The current use is commercial, and the future land use map is also commercial. Looking at the bottom of page 1, the staff recommendation is for approval, pending any public hearing testimony and discussion of a couple of items. We did find that the proposal complies with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process and did find that it's generally compatible with the surrounding area. We did have a couple of items for your consideration. The first, looking at natural features on page 2. And if we go back to the aerial view, you may be able to see there's a portion of the southern property line that contains mature trees. And we suggested that the applicants address preservation of these trees along the southern property line. That was left unaddressed. And then also we had a note on hours of operation. If you look at the land use map here, you'll see the properties directly to the south are single-family residential. And so if you look on page number 2 at the bottom under surrounding land uses, due to the proximity of the single-family uses, staff suggested that the applicants consider limiting hours of operation. Currently, they're proposing 6 a.m. to 12 a.m. Other recent applications for commercial development adjacent to single-family have limited hours of operation to 10 p.m. on weekdays. So we just had those few items for your consideration, but like I said, our recommendation is for approval.
Rachel, is that a typo from 6 a.m. to 12? No, it's not. Okay. So it'd be, if we comply, it'd be 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Got it.
That was our suggestion, yes.
Time change. All right. Commissioners, any questions? All right. Is the applicant here? Yes, sir. If you would come, or your representative, yes.
Good evening, Chris Davenport, 921 College Street. I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, Chris.
Let me first address the hours of operation. That's a revised set of DPCs that limit it to 10 p.m. When staff mentioned during the process limiting those, I submitted the 12 a.m. and then when they did their report, they said 10 p.m. would be more consistent. So we've already agreed to that. Other than that, all I really have to add here, I want to explain why the building is currently larger than GB would allow for. It was rezoned GB from a previous zoning, one of the old classifications, so it was grandfathered in. The building was already bigger than what GB allows for. So we are wanting to increase it, Goodwill is. This is the the property kind of across the street from Zaxby's down close to campus. My understanding is this will be probably still some retail, but largely like a career center training facility. So that's what the additional square footage is for. So
Chris, what about the preservation of the trees?
I just didn't include that because it's a commercial property, and given the square footage they're going to, I mean, I'll tell you, if the trees they're concerned about is in the back, I really don't know why they remove those anyways. I really felt like, I mean, they don't intend to move things out of building envelopes, but the building envelope be pretty big here. It's a 14,000 square foot maximum.
Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Davenport?
Chris, the building materials on the expansion will be pretty much similar or inconsistent with what's there now?
Well, it's probably, when I look, they're pretty, well, they're high end. So it's all masonry materials or LP Smart siding. And frankly, I'm not sure what is there, Commissioner Starks. I know that that's the requirement that the staff asked for. That's what we went with.
Okay.
It would allow for metal panels with the hidden fasteners, the better type of commercial siding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience tonight that has a question or an opposition to this request? Okay. Hearing none, Commissioners will call for a motion,
I'll
please.
make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment, excuse me, together with and condition upon the general development plan, docket number 2023-72Z-BG, based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that the motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Starks?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Drain?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Warren?
Yes, ma'am. The motion is approved and goes to the Bowling Green City Commission for final approval. Our next item tonight is 2023-73-ZBG, Samparan LLC, Karasunta Patel, has filed an application to rezone 3.22 acres located on the northeast side of Spring Hill Avenue, approximately 192 feet from Russellville Road, from highway business to RM3 townhouse multifamily residential with a general development plan. Sir.
Thank you, Chair Warren. We had a pre-application meeting back in August, and we're actually just looking, if you look at the screen here, just this rear portion of the property is what's subject to the rezoning request. So the front half would remain HB as it currently sits today, but the proposal for the back is to convert the zoning from highway business to RM3. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. The current zoning is highway business, and the current use is commercial, and the future land use map is also commercial. Looking down at our staff recommendation, let me go back to the site plan actually. Wait, going the wrong way, sorry. Well, I might be missing it. Oh, I think the one from before got inserted in the PowerPoint. So just reference page 6 of your report, and you can see the front area there proposed to remain HB. There are a couple of commercial buildings shown. Again, that's not part of this application. What you're focusing on this evening is mainly that section on the rear side. And you can see that they've proposed, it looks like 8 multifamily buildings with access from Spring Hill Avenue, and then also some interconnectivity with the commercial development to the front. In reviewing the application materials that were submitted, we found that the proposal complied with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process, and that the proposal is generally compatible with the surrounding area. We did have a couple of considerations. The first regarding access. Transportation infrastructure section on page 2 just notes that the applicant has not currently addressed access to the site. And then the last point for your consideration relates to the proposed open space, and that's referenced on page 3 under proposed open space. And the applicants are proposing to include a minimum of 25% open space, which is 5% more than the minimum in the zoning ordinance. The staff suggested that the applicant identify any residential amenities that are planned for the development. However, this was left unaddressed. So with that, our recommendation is for approval pending public hearing testimony and discussion of any of those items I just mentioned.
Rachel, this is in a floodplain, correct?
Yes, if we go back to the zoning map, you can see the area that's currently in the floodplain is designated in that blue color. And the applicants may want to address that a little further, but it's my understanding that if this were to move forward, that they are prepared to re-engineer the site, get proper floodplain amendments through FEMA before they could move forward with any development of this site.
And Rachel, is there a maximum density for RM3?
There is. It's based on the acreage. They have plenty of land to meet that. Okay. If we look at the density map, just to compare what's in the area, we can see that densities in the area, either existing or approved, range from 1.63 to 24.5 dwelling units per acre, and their proposed density is 19.88 dwelling units per acre.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that I understand, currently, they could not build on it unless they were to address the floodplain issue, correct?
Correct.
And
Either under the current HB zoning or any future zoning, they would have to address that before they could develop that area.
So essentially tonight, what we would be doing is making a determination on what they could do with it if they meet that floodplain requirement, correct?
Yes.
All right, very good.
So,
How does FEMA work? I mean, I'm sure the applicant's here and they'll address that, but how does that work?
So there's a formal amendment process through FEMA, any areas that are in the floodplain, and I'll let the applicant's engineer speak more to that as far as what is in detail required to submit for them to review that to be amended. But there is a formal process that they would go through.
Mr. Volker?
well, the only other thing I was going to say, because I've seen some people in the audience, is we'll go ahead and state that they will have to take care of their own water before they can move forward. So that is something that engineering would have to approve and would have to be done and submitted. So I understand some of you might be here to talk about that, but that'll be something that'll have to be corrected before they could get a permit. And if it can't be done, won't get a permit.
But just a minute. Yes, ma'am. We'll get to everybody in the audience. All right. Any commissioners, any other questions? Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here or their representative?
Chris Davenport, 921 College, and I still swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, Chris.
Let me address the access issue first. The transportation authorities did not require any type of improvement, so initially we didn't have no transportation DPCs. I did talk with staff today, and I think what will suffice to check this box would be a development condition that says access to the property shall be via no more than one access point upon Spring Hill Avenue, the location of which to be coordinated with the Bowling Green Public Works. That's the correct authority, right? Yeah. So that's what the concept shows. That's what they're going to do. Really, the frontage on Spring Hill's so narrow, you couldn't have more than one anyways. So Mr. Patel's here, and at the right time, I'll have him agree to that, but that will be how we address the access.
Where do you plan to put that DPC that you just read?
let's just make it number 11. That be okay with you, Mr. Moore? Okay. As for the application itself, the points I would like to stress, and you've already hit on probably most of them, this is what I would call a down zoning. This is a HB zone. I'm going to remind or point out it's currently an HB zone without any conditions. So there are no binding elements, no development conditions that this property is currently subject to. And to keep that in mind, that would mean that the property, assuming, right, the flood issues are addressed, could have a 90% lot coverage under the ordinance. And so what I'm going to suggest to you is not only is this a lowering of intensity if this application passes from a very intense commercial use to a multifamily use, there are going to be a lot of conditions that get added that are not currently on the property. And I want to highlight those for you. The first one is the lot coverage. It would go from 90% to essentially 75%. I think we can all agree that ought to make the water issues easier. I mean, the lot coverage kind of goes hand in hand with how much these engineers have to work to engineer these projects. Secondly, if this passes, the building height will be restricted to 2 stories. There's currently no height restriction on this HB property. There'd be a restriction of singular ownership and management. There'd be a restriction regarding the orientation of buildings. There'd be a restriction concerning setbacks along Spring Hill and conforming with the existing setbacks. There'll be a condition of building materials. So, the ordinance builds in certain minimums for every zoning class. Typically, these conditions increase those minimums. They increase the conditions. So that's one thing that will go along with this rezoning. Rachel talked about the density at 19.88. I think that compares well with some of the immediate densities in the area, 24.5, 24.5, 18.3, and 17.89. The last thing I'll say is this. If you look, I always go the wrong way every time. So I think this is probably the best example of it. If you look at, we're talking about the area that's outlined in red. Currently, that area is zoned to HB along with the frontage on Russellville Road. So I often talk about transitioning of uses before this body. If this zoning is approved, then the uses along Russellville Road working your way back would transition from highway business, a very high-intensity commercial use, to multifamily, and then on to single family. Frankly, from a planning standpoint, I always advocate very frequently to this board, that makes more sense than a transition from high-intensity highway business straight to single family. And again, we would be limiting our structures to 2 stories. There's no height restriction currently on this HB property if it's developed without being rezoned. So those are the points I wanted to make with you all. I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Commissioners, any other questions before he calls his engineering firm up for Mr. Dedmon?
That's what I was going to say, go ahead and call.
Yeah.
Brian Shirley's here from ACES, and I'll let him speak to, frankly, the increased scrutiny you get when you're dealing with floodplains and what that means from an engineering standpoint. Can you speak to that, Brian?
Do my best. Brian Shirley, 1136 South Park Drive, Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Swear to tell the truth, Brian?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So before we can really go much further with this.
Let's go back. Could you go back to the page that shows on the screen the floodplain area, the blue map right there? Is that it? No. Yeah.
So we've done a field survey and we've identified that this is approximately the limits of the high water mark for the 100-year floodplain. What we'll have to do is do a flood map amendment to take that area that's in blue out of the flood zone. What our intent is to the northeast of this property, that's where it starts getting a little bit deeper. We'll be excavating out more. So we have to accommodate not only the existing floodwaters that are there, but also any increased runoff that we propose. So with doing that, that would make more of this land available. We're not exactly sure where that line will be at this point, but we're guessing, a fairly close guess to where the limits of the rezoning are. And with this, we'd also like to try to take out, if you look at the very back corner, there's a little bit of blue on the residential properties, single-family residential that are RM4 or RM3, to try to get that flood zone off of those properties as well, so they wouldn't have to pay any flood insurance. And we cannot increase the amount of runoff and quantity of water onto anybody else. So we're going to have to contain everything, the existing flood waters that are there, plus the additional runoff.
So Brian, for the neighbors that are here today, when you talk about excavating and moving material out to make that, if you want to call it retention area, deeper, how, just ballpark, how deep are you thinking?
It may be 8 to 10 feet.
Okay.
Because right now it's a shallow flood area, but it's still a fair amount of water. So we have to take that into consideration along with the additional runoff that we generate with the development.
And generally, when you do something like that, would that area be fenced in?
Typically, we'd like to fence it in just to keep anybody from getting in there if there's
Correct.
a chance for water to stand anywhere.
Do you think that that would be a condition you all would put in your DPCs, that would be fenced?
Yeah, I think the applicant's agreeable to that.
Well,
Right.
I think that would be more safe, 10 feet
Sure.
for the neighbors, children,
Absolutely.
pets.
And our goal is to try to make the slopes as slight as possible. We don't want to go in with a 2-to-1 slope, but it's all rock, and it looks bad after time.
Right.
So if you get 3-to-1 or 4-to-1, those are technically a mowable type slope. So try to avoid the ugly riprap that you see on a lot of slopes. We don't want that, and our client doesn't want that either.
Mr. Shirley, do I understand you to say that your intent is to try to get the floodplain off of those 2 or 3 residential lots?
Yeah, by the time we do our excavation for the basin, and then we do a new analysis of where the high water is, our goal is to get that flood zone off of those single-family residential.
Do you or your client own those lots?
We do not.
So they would benefit from that?
Yes, sir, they would.
Because they would no longer have to pay flood insurance then?
Correct.
Okay, and then the last question is, in addition to meeting the requirements here locally, when I say requirements, I'm referring to floodwater retention, et cetera.
Yes.
You would also have to meet the federal FEMA requirements, is that
Correct.
correct? Okay. No other questions for me.
Mr. Shirley, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
What's been the extent of the flood problem prior to this project? Has there been
To my knowledge, I do not know if there has been a flood problem. I'm sure the adjacent property owners can probably tell you, probably with pictures, exactly what has happened.
Okay.
But it is our goal to mitigate that issue for them.
That's the reason I asked. You
Yeah.
feel comfortable that your proposed development excavation will minimize or mitigate that
Yes.
situation? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley.
Thank you.
Chris, we'll get to you in just a second. We've heard our proposal tonight and appreciate you neighbors being here. And if there are questions, would like for anybody to come to the microphone and state your questions or opposition or whatever.
I'll go first if I can get up. I've got some neurological issues, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. If you would state your name.
My name is Barry Rose, R-O-S-E. My father, Kent Rose, owns 87 Spring Hill and 2148 Leland. They are the first two houses as
Okay,
you go
and so,
around.
all right, so you're representing your father?
I live there too.
Okay,
yes.
okay, yes, sir. If you would swear to tell the truth?
I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, sir.
I have three concerns. My father, again, told me this afternoon that when Spring Hill was developed, and it's slightly older than me, there was a covenant from the developer that there would not be apartments in front of us, and there would be a 20-foot setback that for at least 20 years we had been mowing, and until we fenced it, it was sort of an extension of our backyard. We didn't do anything, but we took care of it and kept it mowed, and that's my first concern. I would hope the city would get involved with this and slow it down. Secondly, I'm worried about the flooding. That's the lowest spot in that area back there, and it's overgrown, and frankly, I don't know where the water grows. Even as a kid, we didn't play down there. And people will address that better. My third comment is I would hope that a rezoning or government doing something for a developer would be a reward. We have tornado damage that has been there since the tornado that students from Alabama drove up here and picked up and put in a pile, and he would not let the FEMA contractor remove it. It's still there. There's a base of BGMU wire and covered by debris and roofing that kids have picked up, and it is still sitting there today. And I'm afraid, frankly, it will be pushed into whatever hole they dig. And if you drive through there, there's already fill material being dumped. And it's more of a landfill right now than it is a property. And it's very obvious there are piles that's been going on, and the tornado took out the mom and pop grocery and it grew back as a liquor store. And I guess my last comment would be, and I remember playing on most of the area around it, and now we're surrounded on three sides with apartments. And this will be the fourth. We'll be completely closed in.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Appreciate your comments. Yes, is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Yes, ma'am. If you come to the microphone, please. If you'd state your name and address, please.
Deborah Yarberry, 2110 Leland Street,
Swear
Bowling Green.
to tell the truth.
I swear to tell the
Thank you.
Okay. If you look at your map up here, and that blue area, and you go down Leland Street, I am the last house on that street. And I have pictures, if I could pass my phone around, with the flooding that has taken place. I've lived there since 1996, and I have watched these floodwaters come and go. And like my neighbor just stated, it fills up. I call it Leland Lake. It gets into my property up to the back of my yard. And we had a historic rain here of 8 inches. I had a storage building at the back fence of my yard. I asked the man not to put the storage building there because it flooded. I came home, he put it there. The 8-inch rain got up to the floor of that building, and we were saved. The person who owns the property now bought it, turned it into a landfill, cut the trees, dumped anything and everything in this field, and where this water drains to is a cave system. There is a hole in there that the water drains into. Once this cave system got clogged and plugged up with tree cutting and debris dumping in there, we got another historic 7-inch rain. It got 6 inches into my storage building. The water stayed there longer. The water got higher than I've ever seen it before, and that was just from what they did in that field. I'm really concerned. What we haven't discussed is, let's go into Spring Hill subdivision. We've discussed this lot, okay. They're going to dig a hole and worry about the flood in this lot. When you go down Leland Street, you start up with this gentleman's house, and it's step ladders all the way down that street. And I can stand at my street, and the house at the end of the street is above my house. And I am step laddered all the way down to the end of that street. You go up the street in front of me, same thing. Step ladder down to my house. The next street, step ladder down to my street. And this is in Spring Hill subdivision, where no one, from what I've understood, has ever planned when back in 1960s, when this area was being planned, there was no flood plan for this, other than send it to that field and let it go into a cave.
Okay.
So my house is ground zero for flooding.
All right.
If we fix this, where's all the water that's coming down going to go? If they build this up, it's going to go on me.
Okay, so you're this last corner lot down here by the blue?
Yeah.
Okay,
At
all
the
right,
very end of the street,
Right.
that's me.
all right.
And the neighbor next to me, they have a little toddler, well, he's not even a year old now.
Okay.
Their yard floods as well.
All right. Everybody gets about 4 minutes, so
Okay.
I appreciate you sharing the pictures with us and your well-thought-out comments. We're not cutting you off, but there's other people who want to speak also.
Real quickly, ma'am, are you currently paying flood insurance?
Not at this time, no.
But yours,
I was told,
yours is the
I've
last
discussed it with
house?
my insurance company, they looked at the map, and they said no. But my fear is if this is built, I'm going to need it.
So, am I misunderstanding? It looks like the back of your house, the lot, is in the floodplain
It is,
currently.
The house,
because the structure
the
isn't.
house, the structure's not in the floodplain.
Oh, okay, all right,
That's why.
okay, very good. Thank
And
you.
my other concern is coming out, the access into Spring Hill, just to get out of that light now, we sit and wait forever. And now they're going to allow an access into that short little street, and we will have a hard time getting out of that neighborhood, because the only other access is them coming through that shopping center to get out. All of these apartment complexes they're looking at putting in, they're going to have to go around, circle around the shopping center or whatever they're going to put in there, or come out into our street. And it's going to be, it's a short little street too.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes. It would be possible for you to email those photographs that you showed the commission, so we can close that in the record.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. So we've talked about the flooding and the traffic issues of this proposed zoning change. Is there anybody else that has something different other than traffic or the flooding? Yes, ma'am.
Stacy Ennis, I live at 2134 Leland.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm 4 houses up from.
You swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I have kids, pets, all of this that's going to be going on directly behind my house. I don't feel safe with people renting their townhouses or whatever behind me. We own our homes. That shouldn't, I don't feel safe with that going up, period.
Okay.
My house is also in the floodplain, and she's right. There's hills in front of us, and our house is ground zero. I have a sinkhole right on the other side of my fence on Mr. Patel's land, okay, that runs into that cave that's underneath there. And when it gets clogged up, it backs up. So when they start digging all this stuff and doing all this, it's going to get worse. I don't care what the engineer says or anything else, it's going to get worse. When they cut all the trees down and blocked all that off, then that rain come, all of our backyards down through there were flooded, and they were flooded for a week. That's all I got.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir. Anything different?
Just a little bit. I got a few questions.
All right. Yes, sir. Your name?
Billy Burgett, 2202 Leland Street. I'm across the street from where
You
all
swear
this
to
is
tell the
going.
truth?
Yes,
Billy?
sir.
All right.
I'm across the street from where all this is going to happen, and my concerns, you was talking about the runoff area being fenced in. Who's going to maintain that and keep it from growing up and keeping us from having like snakes and stuff like that, or any kind of stuff going on there? Kids getting in there and not being able to get out if they do get in there and not be able to be found? Will they have to maintain that? Will the city maintain that, keeping it mowed down or keeping any weeds or anything that grows up in there?
They would have to manage.
They would have to maintain that. All right. And you did address, yeah, and that's something about a lot of the flooding. I mean, we probably didn't have as much of the flooding problem before all the debris was put in there and all the trees were cut down because it was more open as far as land wasn't piled up and stuff. The access road coming out to Leland, or the Spring Hill, that's a steep hill. That's going to put a dangerous situation with cars coming up that hill trying to get out and not being able to see perfectly down both sides of the road there or what's on the other side once they do come up. Because that's a 5 to 7 foot drop there, or better, maybe more. His father's mowed it for years. So that's my concern is more in the safety. Since they extended Hickory Street to run all the way to Veterans, we've seen an increase in traffic through there. I've called the city numerous times about people thinking that's a drag strip and maybe getting speed bumps. Well, we can't do that because it slows down emergency vehicles. We could do half speed bumps so they could go around them. We get a police officer in the neighborhood for a couple hours, they pull 2 people over, don't see nothing else. People just keep on. I mean, we've got motorcycles that go down through well above 100 miles an hour. And this is just going to increase the traffic, not just because they're coming out of there to go to Leland to go to Russell Road, but they're coming out there to go through the neighborhood to Walmart also and back. So it's going to increase the flow of traffic quite a bit. We're having 64 units from what I'm understanding. 8 houses with 8 plexes. So it's 64 units, 64 families moving into that area.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. We've heard, we'll hear everybody, but we've talked about traffic, the floodplain, the safety, the aesthetics of the apartments backing up to single-family homes. If somebody has something different?
I had to rebuild my house there because of the tornado. If I knew this was a possibility, I never would have rebuilt there.
Okay, all right. We can't undo the past. We're here to talk. Okay, yes, sir, and we appreciate your comment. No, wait a minute. We're talking about the future, and so, yes, ma'am. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay.
And your name, please?
Sally Schmidt, 2205 Leland. I live on the other side.
Okay, and you swear to tell the truth?
I swear to tell the truth. And everybody took some of my points and seconded the traffic. But the one left is to talk about green space in Bowling Green. The tornado really ripped up the trees, the old trees that we had along there. And, it's hotter, it's noisier without the trees, and that green gives at least a little relief to us when we're coming back into our damaged, naturally damaged area. I guess that's the way I want to put it. And so having that little relief. There's also trees that the neighborhood paid for along Spring Hill to plan towards the future of a lovely tree-covered roadway. And I don't know what this would do to them. It might destroy them completely, which would be a real shame given how many trees were lost in Bowling Green and how much we're going to need them in the future for, as climate gets hotter, et cetera.
Sure, thank you. Yeah.
But a big second on the traffic, it's gotten a lot worse.
So, the tornadoes was, okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
So that was a tragedy for all of us. And so, yes, sir. Do you have a question?
No, a comment. If this was being residential housing versus multifamily plexes, we probably wouldn't have as big of an issue as far as it being there. Right.
Okay. So we're talking about the safety and the multifamily backing up to residential. So, okay. Are there any other questions or comments? We don't want to. Yes, sir. You've got one more. Come up to the microphone.
What I have seen on the internet, the proposal, I don't see a setback from our fence to this building that's going to be there.
There's a setback in the ordinance, and is it 25 feet or 10, what is it, Rachel?
Yeah, the building setback along the rear property line would be a minimum of 25.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
there's also a 10-foot landscaping buffer that's required also along that same property line. Before,
35?
no, it would be a 10-foot buffer outside of the 25-foot setback. So the 25-foot setback is for an actual structure or building. So you could have parking within that 25 feet. But you would have to have a 10-foot buffer between the neighborhood and the parking.
So at least 10 feet and maybe 25 if we're lucky.
10 from pavement, 25 for a building. Yes.
So Chris, can you come up? I've got a couple things.
Yeah, would you mind if I address that last concern first while it's fresh on my mind?
Sure.
One of your development plan conditions that the staff asked for, and we included, was a condition that no less than 50% of the parking would be between these existing homes you're hearing from and the multifamily structures. That's also consistent with the concept plan. The reason for that is to keep the two-story structures farther from that property line, and so that we design the property in such a way that we move them away from that. So that's something the staff had already considered. We'd agreed to it. You'll see it in the conditions. So,
Okay. Two things that I would ask.
yes, sir.
Is, would the applicant, would he consider putting a fence along the back line?
Yes.
Okay? And is there any amenities? You got 64 units you got a density of 19, and we've seen it. I mean, it's a lot of density for that. I mean, with no amenities. Are there any amenities that can be incorporated here?
We can't, and I'll tell you why we can't. It's a 3-acre site,
I get that.
and although we've committed to at least 25% open space, the floodplain and the engineering required for that, it's going to be higher than that. And so it's going to take, I mean.
But you would be to put a fence all the way around off the back.
We'll agree to construct, the developer will construct what's the typical privacy fence, 6 feet?
6 feet.
A 6-foot tall privacy fence along the, what direction would that be, Rachel?
South.
The northwest property line.
Okay. And I think that's important.
Yeah,
I think it's important to the homeowners that they're not sitting there looking right into a parking lot.
Yeah, and I anticipated that, frankly. You know, technically, and I call those homes single-family homes. I think for the most part, that is the use they're currently under. Technically, it's zoned RM3.
I know.
But I think the current use is largely largely single-family. And that's why I asked Mr. Patel this afternoon whether that's something he would agree to.
And then I think something was said earlier about putting a fence around the basin or around the retention area so that kids or pets cannot get into it.
So what I'm going to suggest, and if the commission would like, I can address some of these points, if you want me to, that some of the neighbors raised. But I will also offer the fencing along the northwest property line as number 11, and then with regard to, number 12, and then number 13, I'll have Mr. Patel agree to a DPC that reads, I wrote this down somewhere, that the developer shall prohibit public access to any designated water retention area, (S), could be more than one, by fencing same, unless prohibited by applicable state or federal agency. And the reason I included the qualifier is, particularly because of the floodplain, FEMA and those folks are going to have to approve everything they do out there. And Brian doesn't think it will be prohibited. The lawyer in me says, I don't want to agree to a condition that the federal agencies say you can't do, or we're not going to give you your permits. So, again, he doesn't think that will be an issue. I will say along the same lines, the concern about the maintenance, we've got a development condition of singular ownership management. So there can't be any pointing fingers of who's supposed to be maintaining the retention areas. There will be one owner and manager. So there won't be any question about that from a code enforcement standpoint.
Well, and a concern I think I've heard is the concern of how the property has been kept since the tornado.
As prior to that.
And that's
And I
that's a
can't,
concern.
I'm not in a position to speak to that. I did hear what the neighbors said about that.
So I have one more question, and this is probably for staff as well. What I'm measuring here is what they are currently entitled to do and what this proposal offers. And so if I understood Mr. Davenport, currently, they don't have to agree to any of this. They can just go out there and do whatever they want to do with
Under
regard-
highway business.
Under highway business, and I think the density under highway business is,
That would be under GB. You
it
could
was
do
under GB.
You could do multifamily
Yeah,
under GB,
under
not
GB.
HB.
Yeah.
But you could have, highway business commercials or the more intense commercial enterprises. And you could have that on this property, no limitation of hours, no signage limitation, no building limitations other than the,
But they could build any structure they wanted to build under that zoning, correct?
correct.
Okay.
Talking about the front of the.
And I understand y'all's concern about, thinking there maybe was a covenant that nothing like this would be done, but I don't think that would be the case. I mean, this is a separate parcel, so,
We understand it's going to lower the densities you're talking about, we understand that, yes, but I'd rather have a store back there than have paint places back there. Because the store's going to have their business going on, I'm not worried about their hours of operation as far as that goes, and they're going to have access to Russell Road, coming in and out, not interfering with our
There's been
subdivision.
2 shootings on Russellville Road, one in an apartment where they shot, run over, and it would be going right into our windows.
So the big picture of it is, the apartments is what we have the biggest issue with going there. We had no problem with the way it's set up right now, and then go ahead and do what they want to in the land, put 19 stores on it, 4 stories high.
Yeah.
That's, the issue is having all the additional 64 families living in behind us at all times, with whatever chaos comes from that, and accessing our backyards.
All right, thank you, Chris.
The last thing I would like to address was the concern about it was really a concern about sight distance. There was a talk about the grade of the road, and I just want to reiterate that the transportation cabinet, when they look at this, didn't require anything about that intersection. We did commit here to, basically coordinating the spot with Bowling Green Public Works. So in other words, if there's a sight distance issue, then they're going to make us move that wherever along our frontage. So I think that's already addressed in the development conditions. I think it would be proper at some point to have Mr. Patel agree to those other DPCs.
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
One other question.
Yes, sir.
Before he comes up. I think Ms. Cornsmith brought up the fact about trees that had been planted, and you may have already addressed this.
No, I didn't, Commissioner Starks. I would anticipate that she's referring to trees that have been planted in the right-of-way.
Okay.
And so the right-of-way, not owned by the developer, not controlled by the developer, that's owned by the appropriate transportation authority, in this case, Bowling Green Public Works.
Okay.
So I don't think they planted trees on Mr. Patel's property.
They maintain, these 2 maintain that, keep it mowed and looking really nice. But right behind it now is just a dump.
All right. Okay. All right, thank you. I think we've heard the concerns and the issues. So Chris, if you would call your client, please.
Mr. Patel, state your name if you would, please.
My name is Ashok Patel. I live in 1451 Rigsby Avenue, Bowling Green, Kentucky.
You swear to tell the truth?
Swear, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Patel, I've got 3 conditions I need to read to you, and when I'm finished with those, I want to ask you whether you agree to these, okay? The first is that the development will be served by no more than 1 access point along Spring Hill Avenue, the location of which will be coordinated with the Bowling Green Public Works. Do you agree to that?
On Spring Hill Road?
Yeah, that you would have no more than 1 access point on Spring Hill Avenue. That's what your concept shows. I'll tell you.
I got one access
Okay.
right now.
Yeah, and do you agree not to have more than one and to work with the Bowling Green Public Works on where that will be?
Okay.
You agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. Number two, actually it'd be number 12, that's number 11, right, Ham?
Yes.
And then number 12 would be, do you agree to construct a 10-foot privacy fence along the northwest property line? I'm sorry, 6, thank you. A 6-foot privacy fence along the northwest property line.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then 13 is, do you agree that you will prohibit public access to any designated water retention area by fencing same unless prohibited by applicable state or federal agency?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Patel. All right, Commissioners, we've heard the applicant's modifications, and we've heard testimony from the witnesses in the audience tonight. So would call for a motion, please. We have a motion to approve or a motion to deny.
I make the motion to deny the proposed zoning map amendment docket number 2023-73ZBG. Based upon this testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is not consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its noncompliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is not in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
So, Ham, clarify this when we have a motion to deny. Second, excuse me.
So has there been a second?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So there's before you a motion to deny, and you will now vote. It will take at least 3 votes in favor of denial that, in order to make that recommendation to the City Commission. So a vote yes is in favor of denial. A vote no is in favor of the development.
All right. Angela, if you'd call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Drain?
Yes.
Commissioner Starks?
Yes.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes.
Vice Chair Graham?
I'd like to explain my vote here. Even though it sounds to me as if this could actually be an improvement to some of the neighbors due to their concern of, they simply seem to not want it. So I vote yes.
Okay.
And Chairman Corn?
Yes. So the motion has been denied and will not go to the Bowling Green City Commission. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you all.
All right. Our next item tonight is 2023. We got one more item here. 2023-74ZBG TCP Properties LLC, care of Clay and Trapper Pendleton, have filed an application to rezone 3.53 acres located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Mount Victor Lane, Old Lovers Lane, from highway business to RM4, multifamily residential with the general development plan. Ms. Hurt.
Thank you, Chair One. We had a pre-application meeting back in September for the property you just referenced, located at the corner of Mount Victor Lane and Old Lovers Lane. Let me show you the aerial view here, and then we'll see that the current zoning is highway business, and the current use is vacant, and the future land use designation is commercial. Let me jump back to the concept plan here. And so just looking at the summary of the request, the applicants are proposing to construct 96 multifamily units, and they've actually already developed the property to the south, so this concept shows the current development on the right-hand side. how it would flow and tie in together with the newly proposed development, which would be the left side of the concept there. In reviewing the application, the staff found that the application complied with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process. We did have a couple of items for your consideration. The first relating to transportation infrastructure, and that's on page 2. For the current development, that would be, again, the right-hand side. There was a traffic impact study that was submitted with that application in 2021. There was not a requirement for an additional traffic impact study for this development. However, KYTC's stance remains the same. In 2021, they had stated that the left turn lane on Lovers Lane at the intersection of Mount Victor Lane should be eliminated. So that would be the left turning lane back by the Crossroads IGA. And so their stance remains the same, and the applicants did not agree to this requirement. And then looking at the surrounding architectural features on page 3, we've got a note on building height. Just noting that most of the structures in the area are 1 or 2 stories, and the applicants are proposing a maximum building height of 3 stories. With that, I believe that's all I have for the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Rachel, just from memory, when the developers, the Lovers Lane, that's a state highway, correct?
Yes.
And that's really the state's issue of...
Well, according to the traffic impact study in 2021, that was the recommendation that it be closed at that time. And so I'll let Mr. Davenport maybe explain a little bit.
I know, but the state's the one's got to close it, correct?
Not necessarily. That was the argument in 2021.
Yeah.
So that I suspect that may be the same argument this evening.
Okay.
And so, Rachel, remind me, the units next door that they are building, are they RM3 or RM4?
They are RM3, if we go back to the map here. So the reason they've requested the RM4 zoning is for the, if we go back to the concept here, they're wanting to build 3-story buildings.
Yeah.
And then also with more than 8 units per building.
Yeah, no, okay, I get, and then remind me of the amenities that are in the other development.
So the applicant may want to explain a little bit more about that, but I think it was their hope in adding these 2 sections together that they would actually be able to provide more green space and amenities for the development as a whole.
Okay.
Commissioners, any other questions for Rachel?
And Rachel, once again, I'm remembering this highway issue. Wasn't there a state and a federal highway there? There were 2 entities involved, as best I recall. Is that still the case?
We had comments from both city and county public works because this portion of Old Lovers Lane, it kind of flips back and forth between city and county. And then, of course, Lovers Lane is that state maintained road. And so back in 2021, we had received the traffic impact study and feedback from all 3 of those agencies.
Yeah, all right, there you go. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, any other questions? Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Chris Davenport, 921 College Street, still swear to tell the truth. This is a little bit like Groundhog Day. I think all of y'all were on the commission in 21 when we argued this, like kind of what I'm going to call the first phase, the sister to this request that's already under construction for the Pendleton Brothers. As I told the board at that time, and Chair Warren's kind of stole my thunder, the state can close, that left turn could be closed tomorrow. The state wouldn't have to ask anybody to do it. They could do it themselves. And as I informed the board 2 years ago, what the ordinance says about this is in section 3.14, the board should consider a traffic impact study to analyze the effect the proposed project has on the surrounding roadways and intersections, measured against the existing level of service on those roadways and intersections, basically, to paraphrase that. And so I believe, I'd like to make the 21 traffic study an exhibit here. I think for record purposes, that should be done. I think we've got it, okay. And the reason for that is, and everybody knows this is why the state didn't want another traffic study. The intersection there is operating as an F. It has operated as an F before Phase 1. It will operate as an F before Phase 2, after Phase 2. So put another way, under the ordinance, there is no really an effect on the, quote, existing level of service. In the traffic study, it speaks of LOSF. That means level of service F. And as I told the board 2 years ago, the problem with the intersection is not this development. It pre-exists. So for those reasons, I don't remember what the vote was. Obviously, the first vote was successful. I'm basically repeating myself from 2 years ago, that this project will not affect the level of service at the intersection because it is what it is at this point. With that in mind, I can speak to anything else about this application you all want to.
Chris, address the question about the amenities.
Sure. So there's a DPC before you today that says this, what I'll call Phase 2, has access to the Phase 1 amenities.
So it is the same ownership? Exact ownership?
Well, and I can talk to the Pendletons about that.
Well, I see Clay shaking his head no, because my next question will be, will there be a cross easement agreement done?
There'll have to be to satisfy that DPC. In other words, this development has to have access to the amenities in the other. That's what they're, and the practicalities of that will have to be set out in the deeds as these properties are sold or transferred. Okay. So conceivably, you could have an ownership on one and ownership on two, but there has to be reciprocity to the amenities.
Okay.
That's what will be required.
But that's not something we address in the DPC, it's just a requirement if you include the, help me understand that. How do we?
Well, it's kind of like a lot of deed restrictions we don't address in DPCs, but to give effect to the DPC, there'll have to be a deed restriction down the chain of title.
Got it, okay. So
you see that sometimes with joint parking. We may tell the board that it's going to be a shared parking arrangement. To effectuate that, there then has to be a reciprocal easement that follows in the chain of title.
So which DPC addresses the requirement that this property have access to the amenities in the other property? 8? Okay. And so, Chris, if I understand you correctly, in order for them to meet the requirement of 8, then these other legalities would just in turn be met?
They'll have to cross the Ts, dot the Is.
So, in A, the development shall have access to community open space amenities such as playground, community grills, and/or, so are you telling me in Phase 1, there is a playground, a community grills, and a disc golf course?
Yeah, I think if you look, I don't have it in front of me, if you look at Phase 1, if I remember 2 years ago, you made us put pen to paper on what those were going to be.
Well, then that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
So, but, I mean, when you see and/or, I mean, so what is it?
I think
What
it's,
is in
I
Phase
think,
1?
I think that is probably verbatim from Phase 1.
I wouldn't think we'd have and/or.
Rachel's on it.
Okay, because I think that's what we changed. And so really, we're adding 96 units to, if I remember correctly, 128? Clay, is that correct?
We got approved for 144, we built 112 right now.
112, okay. So we're adding 96 units. Really, it's two separate parcels, but we're adding 96 units
no
to
more
the
than that.
complex with the same amenities that are already there, or are we adding new amenities?
Well, we are going to have green space in this project as well. And so whatever, for instance, I was talking to Clay a while ago, I don't think one of your requirements in the first phase was pickleball courts. That's something that's become kind of a craze. They're looking to putting that in the new phase, the old phase. That'll be another amenity that wasn't required that they're going to most likely put in.
I found it.
All right.
The current DPC for Phase 1 says that the development shall include a community open space with amenities such as a playground, community grills, and/or disc golf. So it was left and/or.
So that's why it's still this way. And I will tell you, I think they have.
Or did we make, did we have, you add the pool and clubhouse?
I do think that was.
Or was it?
Clubhouse is in the DPC, the pool was not.
Okay,
We're building a clubhouse, it's there now.
okay.
Are the pavilions under construction as well yet?
So help me understand, Chris, is that I'm looking at this layout right here, the one that's up on the screen, and it shows a clubhouse, a pool, pavilions, a dog park. Are those things there now?
Those things that's the current concept that they're constructing.
So they will be adding those amenities,
Correct.
correct?
So they are building a pool.
No,
Then why is it on the concept?
well, if we get approved the plans to do the pool.
So it's
Of course, I can't bind that property with these conditions.
proposed.
But I cannot bind that property with these conditions.
No, but,
Let me ask a question. I might be able to do that.
yeah, because you could add in this one, you could say there will be a pool, access to a pool.
Just took me a minute to get creative there.
Okay.
We can say here that if a pool be constructed either on this property or the adjoining property to the south-southwest.
With cross out.
Correct.
Yes, okay.
Okay, so now we know there's going to be those
A pool.
amenities there. Okay, that makes a difference. All right, very good.
I'll be honest with you, my only concern, first of all, the RM4 and a 27 density, it's a lot, okay? But my only concern is making sure there's adequate amenities for 208 units.
And also, let me also stress that the condition in this project, like it was in the first project, is connection to the Greenways Trail in Lover's Lane. They must do that too. And that gets these.
I'm looking for a little more amenities.
Yeah.
Well, I understand that, but I don't want to pass on the loop at Lover's Lane and those sorts of things too.
I understand, but for 208 units, it's a complex.
So I think what we need to do on number 8 is say, the developer shall include a pool unless a pool is constructed on the adjoining development to the south-southwest.
Is that to be the part, the final sentence of DPC number 8?
Yes. I think it makes sense there.
So I'm gonna ask the question, if RM3 was the only thing approved here, how many units could go?
Well, you could get more units, you could get more footage, you could get more square footage. From a lot coverage standpoint, if you look at the left so the portion of this property that we're talking about is basically if you take that parking area and everything and to the left, you can imagine you've got 4 structures there, okay? If you put, instead of 4 3-story structures, 6 2-story structures, you're going to end up with the same number of units.
So one of the notes to consider was building height. So then I would ask you and the applicant, and let's go with RM3 and do it that way.
Let me show you why I think the building height here makes sense. So the property we're talking about is in the red.
Yep.
The existing development is to the bottom of that where, you can see a lot of the dirt, right? So if you look at the property that surrounded what I'll call Phase 1, you see those single-family lots. The property that surrounds what I'm calling Phase 2 is exclusively highway business. You've got the highway business across Mount Victor Lane, highway business across Old Lover's Lane, highway business to the rear of the property. The only adjoining property that's not highway business is Phase 1. And that's why I think 3-story structures in RM4 make sense on this lot. I guess we're all aware of the housing. I mean, there was another article 2 weeks ago about the housing need. And so, as I often argue, how do we meet our housing?
Well, you just said we could get as many units.
We could get, but there'll be less green space to go with it.
But we got
And I don't-
all the amenities in phase one.
Well, I mean, there is an amenity to green spaces too, as well as Commissioner Boker.
But if you want, I would imagine the colors and everything will be uniformed to the other complex. So
I mean, I would imagine they will. I'm not sure that's something staff and I
Something
thought
we
about.
probably need to put in here, but if it was uniformed into to the other parcel, to me, it would make more sense to do RM3, so all the buildings and everything match.
Well, I mean, I would say that just because they're a third story doesn't mean they don't match.
But it would look like a normal complex. I mean, you go around, most complexes are the same height.
Well, I could give you examples where they're not. And bear in mind, you've got
90% of them.
you have three-story buildings, apartment buildings in this area.
No, I'm not saying you don't, but
Yeah.
usually when you have three-story, the whole complex is three-story.
Typically, at least in my dealings with staff, when they get the most concerned about 3 stories is when you have 3 stories adjacent to single-family, particularly one-story homes. And that was primarily the case in Phase 1. That's not the case in Phase 2. This property does not adjoin any single-family properties. It is exclusively joined by HB properties, and then the singular exception is the multifamily, which is our Phase 1.
So Chris, help me understand, if they can get the same number of units, I'm not tracking here, I can't quite understand, why the request for RM4?
Probably the elephant in the room, I'm guessing, is that when we put under one roof, you're talking 4 roofs instead of 6 roofs. It will lead to a more affordable, presumably, I mean, the presumption here is that these things flow downhill, and that the cost will be more affordable. Hopefully, the rental cost is also more affordable to some extent. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say economically every dollar gets passed on to the end user. That would be naive. But there is a trade-off to be had. I will remind the body, this is a cemetery road overlay project. The reason you don't see an exorbitant amount of design requirements in these DPCs is they're trumped by that overlay. It's one of the most stringent material design overlays that we have, which is another way to say it also costs more when you build in a cemetery road overlay. I mean, there's no way to get around that. And so that would be the primary variable, I'm sure, for the developer here.
I guess I'm not opposed to RM4. I just personally think the RM3 would look better with the other RM3 that's there. Just my personal opinion.
I understand.
So, I'm sorry, I want you to address that question, and then I'm going to go back to these amenities again. So it shows a pool, it also shows a clubhouse. Is the clubhouse there?
It's being built, yeah.
There is a clubhouse, and that clubhouse would be accessible to this.
Under DPCA, it has to be.
All right. And is there a dog park?
I mean, I would think that probably comes last, you know, after everything else gets.
And I heard you address the pavilions. It shows a number of pavilions, and those are being built or will be built. Is that correct?
Correct.
And did you say there will be a pickleball court built?
That's their hope. I'll tell you what I'll do, assuming.
And the reason I ask that, because if that's the case, and we can put it in just like.
Just like the pool, that's what I'm saying.
I think it gives a little more comfort level.
I'm going to go back here and talk to them. I know at some point you're going to ask if anybody, I've got a kind of a laundry list in my head of things I can maybe clear up for you all.
Okay, very good.
Go ahead and talk with your clients, Chris. Is everybody through with their questions? Okay.
All right, I'll be right back. I hope I've got an offer you cannot refuse. So I'm going to go back to this number 8, because I think this is the one we're working off of. And here's what I'm going to suggest. Let me make my list here. Okay, I'm going to suggest that the last sentence on number 8 read, "The developer shall include the following, : a pool, clubhouse, no fewer than 3 pavilions with grilling stations, a dog park, and a pickleball court or turf recreation area, all of which unless included in the other property." You now know that those things will have to be, and some of it will be on us, because that's we're good. We got more green space because of the taller buildings. We can use some of that on the Phase 2 if it doesn't go on Phase 1. It'll have to go on one or the other. And you kind of back in and probably buttress in your first phase a little bit that way too, that you know those things will be built. And I think, that's the only DPC we've offered. So if it pleases you all, I'll have one of the Pendleton brothers come swear to that. Who wants to agree to that? Come on, Travis.
Trapper Pendleton, 621 Westport Court.
Swear to tell the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Trapper, did you hear that additional condition or that revision that I just read?
Yes.
That dealt with the amenities that will take place on either this phase or the other phase?
Yes,
Do you agree to that?
we do.
Agree to be bound by that?
We do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davenport. Commissioner, I guess no other questions. Is there anyone in the audience tonight has a question or an opposition to this request? Hearing none, would call for a motion, please.
Make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and condition upon the general development plan docket number 2023-74ZBG. Based on the testimonies and the documents presented in the public hearing, the proposed zone map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zone map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Drain?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm so sorry. Let me start over.
That's all right.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Now Commissioner Drain?
Yes, ma'am.
And Commissioner Starks?
Yes.
Vice Chair Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
And Chair Warren?
Yes, ma'am. The motion is approved and goes to the Bowling Green City Commission for final approval. Do we have any new business tonight, Mr. Peterson? All right. Commissioners, thank you all for being here. And
Miss Drain's 27th anniversary. She's late for dinner.
All right, congratulations.
You got that right.